Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to be your host and excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is the 56th episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me, what the show is about, feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or the voiceamerica.com business channel. You can download the app or tune in using your favorite podcast app. Now, if you missed last week's show, I interviewed Matthew Stillman. We talked about our mutual love of improv and the way it weaves into our daily lives, along with the yet-to-be cult book Matthew wrote comparing improv and the 10 Commandments. Yes, people, those 10 Commandments. So be sure to check that show. That's from September 17th. Now, today, my guest is Sarry Ibrahim. Welcome, Sarry.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, listeners, in inviting Sarry on, I'm venturing out on a slightly different topic than I normally talk about, and a very important one. So let me tell you a bit about Sarry's background, and then you'll be able to appreciate where this conversation is going to be heading. Sarry is a financial planner and a member of the Bank on Yourself organization. Now, we're going to talk more about that concept, Bank on Yourself, in a bit. Sarry helps real estate investors, business owners, and full-time employees grow safe and predictable wealth, regardless of market conditions, using a financial strategy that's been around for over 160 years. Sarry started his journey when he was in grad school, completing his MBA. He worked for companies like Allstate, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, HealthSpring, and Humana before he founded Financial Asset Protection. And it's a financial services firm that focuses on one sole concept, the Bank on Yourself concept, also known as infinite banking concept. All right, so listeners, you've been warned. You should probably get out a pen and paper. I'm guessing there's going to be some notes you're going to want to take. So, Sarry, let's jump in. Why don't you tell me more about your background? How did you end up in this field?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And thank you for that awesome introduction. So I started this career when I was doing my MBA about 5 years ago. I was about halfway through my MBA program, and then I started working for different insurance companies. At first, really, my intention was to kind of just test out different industries and different careers and find what I liked. I originally was going to school to be a project manager. But as I was taking the courses, and I just realized I didn't really click well with that subject. It wasn't my passion. I really liked talking to people. I liked working with people, helping them solve problems. And as I was in the insurance industry, I became comfortable talking to people about money. And then people also became comfortable talking to me about their money problems, their financial problems. So I wanted to make a career out of that, simply just helping people with money problems, money issues, whether it was too little of it or too much of it, and really protecting things that matter to them. So again, I didn't really know what career out there would be, what kind of career that would be. So I doing different jobs. I read a lot of books. At one point, I was reading like 3 books at the same time. And I was on Amazon searching for books about like financial planning. And I came across this book called The Bank on Yourself Revolution. And the book talks about the concept, which we can get into later on. Okay. And at the end of the book, it was like, if you'd like to join our program as an advisor, I applied through that program, got accepted, went through the training program, and this is what I do now full time. But really, it was more about problem solving and kind of identifying what people wanted to accomplish really with their money. And that's why I wanted to be on the show, and we can talk about, anything you'd like to talk about.
Thanks, Sarry. It really touched me just now to hear you say that you realized project management wasn't your passion. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I was searching for my career, I had no clue what I want to do. And like you, mm-hmm. I had a similar thing. I was just saying yes to everything. Oh, work on a camp in Wyoming or ski resort in Maine, or, yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I figured all I got to know I got to find the passion. As long as I'm passionate about it, I'll do whatever. So that's really cool that we shared a similar approach. Mm-hmm. So, Sarry, as someone who is formerly financially phobic, Sarry, I seriously used to have to take naps during financial conversations. Not after, during. I would have to lay down like, Damien, I can't take any more right now. And I have come so far, you would be very impressed. So I'm eager to hear how your ideas are about resolving that inner challenge and conflicts many people have, and how you can help people to solve these mindset challenges. Because you said something fascinating about you build trust with people. You got confident and comfortable talking about money because that's not something that people are taught how to do. So you did on the job experience, and then you helped them to get comfortable to talk about it. So that I think is, a real skill, and it shows this level of, what I was picking up when you and I talked for the first time a few weeks ago, this sensitivity and this gentleness you have that I'm guessing is part of your success because people feel safe with you, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. It's definitely, like you said, the first thing is mindset. So money is mindset for sure. Definitely when wanting financial freedom and wanting to kind of take that leap to the next step, it's all about mindset. Like, for example, if somebody is in debt and they're kind of in a tough financial situation, 80% of getting out of that situation is going to be mindset. And what I mean by that is the way they feel about themselves and the way that they perceive the problem, the outcome of the problem. Meaning that,
okay, hold on. I'm going to stop you every once in a while. This is golden. How they feel about themselves and how they feel about the problem.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And how they like see the end result. So you get what you think about. So if you're seeing the end result as positive, you're more likely to get there. And then vice versa. If you never see yourself getting out of that problem, you probably never will. So it all starts with your mindset, thinking clearly, and then focusing on the end result as if you can bet it's going to happen. You need to bet on yourself and really focus on that. And then also you have to be comfortable with identifying your problems. I've talked to clients before that say that, for example, they have a lot of debt or they're in a tough financial situation and they really don't want to look at it. They don't want to see the credit card statements. They don't want to see their mortgage statement because it's going to bring them down. And I think the opposite should be done, is that you should stare at it. You should, when you're in conflict, you should identify the conflict. You should look at it from different angles and really get comfortable facing that conflict. So that way you're more likely to address it and solve it and battle against it when you have a better idea of it.
Yeah. I just love that what I'm hearing is be brave.
Yeah.
And I think that not doing it alone is probably another critical success factor, because over the years, as I've gotten stronger with it, each time I had someone who was holding my hand along the way.
Yep.
Yep.
You're 100% right. It's not a matter of you trying to do it all on your own. There are professionals out there. The same how there are professionals for other industries with doctors, lawyers, accountants, the same thing. You want to have a professional who's invested into your success, who your success is also their success, somebody who can coach you throughout the way and not just tell you what to do, but also help you find that inner leadership within you for you to lead yourself, because that's going to be the best leadership for you.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. And I'd like to, maybe this is like a rewinding question a bit, though.
Yeah.
Most of us aren't educated in finance or how to invest for our future. What are your thoughts on this? I just think about, if we're teaching kids home economics and, other skills, shouldn't we be teaching them financial health?
Absolutely. I always talk about this on other shows, is that, for example, like we're required to take art history and like music, and not that there's anything wrong with those courses, but we're never really required to take, finance 101 in high school, or an introduction to finance, or some basic accounting course, or something with economics or the stock market at a younger age. Those are typically when you go to college and you get a degree in finance, or just from real world experience. And from the experience I've seen working with clients, a lot of people tend to learn more about financial stuff when they're in financial problems. That's when they know how credit cards work. That's how they know when 20% APR interest is bad. That's how they know what a stock market crash is, after they've already experienced it. Yeah, which could be problematic. I think we need to start implementing like basic finance, accounting, economic courses in junior high school and high school, especially in the United States or anywhere in the world, really. But I'm saying, because I live in the United States, so that's why I'm saying to implement it at a younger age, so this way to mitigate future problems. And it also helps the economy, from a fiscal perspective. It helps the economy when more people are more financially literate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you spend time with people helping them to go back to release some of those blockages?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things we do with clients is we have something called a financial analysis meeting, and it's a way to gather their financial situation. Like for example, are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have like a 401k, a retirement plan? Do they have savings? Do they invest in the stock market? We want to understand their financial situation, but more importantly than that, we also want to understand like what their opinion on money is. Like one of the questions on the analysis is what's your definition of retirement? What does retirement mean to you? Every time I've asked that question, I get a different response. For some people, it's wanting to work, not needing to work. For some people, it's working 1 day a week. For some people, it's traveling a lot. Everybody has their own definitions, and that's the most important part of the analysis. It's the conceptual part of it. It's identifying what certain things mean to certain people, and then working from there. What's your definition of financial freedom or being financially successful? So yeah, we definitely take an idea. We look into what they mean about money.
So it's an enormous amount of customizing to that individual. I think something I didn't say at the beginning of the show that is coming up for me now, if people haven't made the connection of, okay, Amy, why are you, there's a program talking, you usually focus on communication and conflict and how to manage your ego.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the direct connection of having this financial freedom that you're describing is when we don't deal with it, when we've got skeletons in our closet, that creates more stress. That stress puts more pressure on us. So it's harder for us to stay partner where I'm holding high respect for the other, high respect for myself in high stress situations. And so it seems like a no-brainer that if I want to be able to be the best partner I can be in an interpersonal setting, I've got to be able to deal with these other things in my life. And if I'm able to tackle this burden and beast of burden, that's what I say, then that is giving me that mental, I don't know if it's clarity so much, mental peace of mind.
Yes.
And I can see, because what's one of the things I've taken my financial clarity and taking a better handle on it during this COVID period, these 18 months. And I can feel that overall anxiety is calming down. And there's also a sense of less feeling like an imposter and less feeling of shame, because I'm now dealing with this skeleton that I was afraid to face in the past. Yeah. So for listeners, that's the idea, is we've got to deal with all aspects of our lives. Okay, now that I've made that connection for listeners, and they may have done it on their own. Sarry, that expression, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Many of us fall into this cycle. How is this problematic?
Yeah, it's problematic. Number one, because you're comparing yourself to others. You're looking at what other people have and then creating this competition for yourself to keep up with other people. And, it's problematic because whenever you compare yourself to other people, that creates anxiety, whether it's financially related or related to anything else. When you compare yourself to other people, it creates anxiety because it speeds up this unnecessary urgency that you need to do something that you really don't need to do at all. So that's kind of the first problem. And then the second problem is that keeping up with the Joneses also could be derived or come from conventional wisdom, where, for example, conventional wisdom is like, it puts people into brackets. Like, for example, when you are 22 years old, you should graduate with a bachelor's degree. When you're 30, you should buy your first home. When you're 35, you should have kids. When you start to follow this rhythm or this pattern, you're putting yourself into situations that you really don't want to be in. What if, and you're mixing in cultural beliefs, religious beliefs,
societal
societal, all these other beliefs that really could be irrelevant to you. So to kind of overcome these two things is that you want to identify your objectives. You want to take your time with this, really drill down on your wants out of life and what's important to you, and then focus on getting those goals, rather than just conventional or not goals that are commonly reachable or commonly reached by other people. You want to focus more on yourself. And then social media, I think, has made, keeping up with the Jones even worse, because people can see what other people have in live now,
Yes.
from Snapchat to Twitter to Instagram, you could see
Yeah.
what people are buying, where they're traveling to instantly in the same
Yeah.
day. So yeah, that's definitely problematic, and it's leading to more financial problems when people are buying things they don't really want. There's a saying, I forgot who said it. It's, we're impressing people we don't like, and we're buying things we can't afford, or we buy
Yeah.
things we can't afford to impress people we don't even like. So
Wow.
yeah,
We're buying things we can't afford to impress people we don't even like.
yeah, yep, yeah.
Thank you for taking such a deep dive into that, because it's sort of a superficial sounding expression, keeping up with the Joneses. And yet, when I listen to you, I hear all of that turmoil that it creates for us and the pressure, and how I've given
Mhm.
into that sometimes. And the other thing I was listening to is you were saying, I should do this, I should do this, I should buy this. And
Yeah.
in coaching, there's an expression, don't should on yourself.
Yeah, and I love it because the word should comes from a belief system. When you
Yeah.
say the word should in any way, it means that you're connecting it to some belief system you have. So, should is it's a judgy word. And I
Yeah.
think it depends on situations.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you now, I want to talk about failure.
Mhm.
I've got to get right into this. Now, like all successful entrepreneurs, I imagine you have had some failures. So I'm curious to hear, what do you think about failure? What's an example of a business failure you've had? What did you learn from it? So feel free to talk around that however you like.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's one of my favorite words. A lot of good has come in my life from failures. So pretty much what failure is something not working out. You planned something, you implemented, you executed, and the result wasn't in your favor or wasn't planned. And I think that's also in the business world. And from a practical standpoint, that's very good, because you've tested things, you've already taken the first step, it hasn't worked. Now you could pivot in a different direction, do it again. The more times you do something, the more likely it is going to work for you. So failure is just saying it didn't work this time. Doesn't
Yes.
mean that it didn't work ever.
Yeah.
So, one of my failures was transitioning from a full-time employee to entrepreneurship. I did that three
Mm-hmm.
times. So 3 times I was a full-time employee, left the job, started a business, put the business on hold because I couldn't afford to keep going, went back to working, and then we did that. So 3 times. Um, um, I failed twice as an entrepreneur. So this is my third time being an entrepreneur. And this is time it's working. It's the longest time I've been self-employed, and it's working. And I see myself being self-employed for the rest of my life now because of the last failures I've had. I've done
Mm-hmm.
things that I didn't plan on. So I just thought that it was going to be guaranteed. I was going to quit my job, find all the clients I need to sustain the business, and it wasn't true. Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So it's okay to get punched in the face. It's not gonna kill
Mm,
you. So
yeah.
you want those situations. I think a lot of people want to avoid all failures. They want
Yes.
to kind of like block every failure, and I think that could be problematic in your life when you try to avoid all failures. You want to mitigate certain things, obviously. You want to
Sure.
mitigate problems in your life, but at the same time, not taking those leaps could actually be problematic because it holds you back and it shortens your goals. Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, he said that the reason
Who,
why
sorry,
people,
who?
Jordan Belfort,
Yeah.
he's the Wolf of Wall Street,
Oh, yes.
and yep, he says that the reason why people are struggling financially is not because their goals are too big; it's because their goals are too small and they're reaching them. So, in other words, we want to expand our horizons. We want to expand our thinking and reach goals, or try to at least not even reach our goals because they're so big, and kind of expand the way we think and kind of look for. One thing I've seen with successful people is they look for problems. They're constantly looking for things that they can't really reach or accomplish
Uh-huh.
because you tend to get more out of life. Like, for example, one of my clients, he was
Oh,
like,
like setting higher challenges to stretch further.
exactly, like one of my
Ah.
clients was buying a building, buying a multifamily residence, selling one of his businesses, and like doing something else, something relevant to business. And one out of those four things worked. So that one thing that did work was very rewarding, very lucrative for him to do. But he says he probably wouldn't have got that one thing if he didn't have three other pending things. So like back to conventional wisdom and education, that would teach us that like if you did four things and you only got one right, that's like a 25% F. You only got one thing,
Right.
right out of the four things. So you should shorten and shorten your goal so that way you have a higher passing rate. When in reality, I think from a business perspective is you want to do more things and the likelihood of one of those things working out is going to be much higher than you anticipated.
Wow. That is such a freeing attitude. And, when I think about my own path, I am not a perfectionist, and I approach things a little bit haphazardly sometimes. And luckily I have an improv attitude, which is like, I say yes to a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
And though it has rewarded me most of the time. Plus, I have a mother whose mantra is failure. Well, I bet you're going to learn something from it. And when I have failed, I don't know if she's literally asked me this, though I feel like I've heard it, her voice in my head saying, so what did you learn from it? And when I moved to Switzerland, if I talk about the stereotype of Switzerland, I had a Swiss boyfriend. He's like, Amy, you say yes to stuff and you don't even consider the fact that you might fail. And I'm like, and it hadn't occurred to me until I saw it through his eyes. He said, if I think I'm going to fail at something, I'll do everything I can to make sure I can avoid it. And if I can't avoid it, I don't say yes to it. And I just thought, oh my God, that sounds like way too much work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I feel very lucky that I grew up with this mentality. And so maybe I've got I'm a little bit ahead of it, though I think that's also something that people can choose to step into. And for me, it's listening to you, Sarry, it makes me want to ask myself, what 4 challenges can I take on? And maybe one of them will be successful. It's such a lighter way to approach your challenges in life.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think we're as human beings, we're meant to take further leaps than we could anticipate or think about. We could do more than we actually realize we could. So we're more capable of doing much bigger things than we've been taught growing up, than, staying in our lanes. We're actually, like designed to do way more than we could ever imagine.
Yeah, so true. Wow. So, before we go for break, now this may go past break, so you tell me if we can start this conversation. I want to ask you what you mean by breaking the cycle, and how can people do that? Now, you may have been talking about something that I just want to be clear what that means for you, breaking the cycle.
Yeah, so breaking the cycle in terms of financial literacy, or in the financial sense, from what I've seen, it's typically people who follow a certain cycle. Like, for example, not being financially free, or living in a tough financial situation, and it being over and over, where it's like from generation to generation. And then breaking that cycle is obviously changing that. It's altering the future outcome based off of previous results. And
hold on, say it again. Altering the outcome based on previous results. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So you're changing what's going to happen moving forward, from that's different from the past. And the way to do this from a financial standpoint, the way to do this is really to have the mindset. Number one is have a mindset. Number two, get comfortable with looking at the financial problems in your life. Number three, working with a professional. And then number four, drilling down on your specific wants out of life. And if you notice, Amy, I'm really emphasizing on wants, not just needs. You also need to really take care of your wants. So emphasizing on your wants.
I like that. You need to take care of your wants. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And then really having a specific goal towards those, not just keeping up with the Joneses. You're doing things because you want to do certain things in your life.
Because that, I'm guessing, gives us the motivation.
Yeah, motivation, exactly.
Yeah, that's what's inspiring. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So, do you want to say more about this? Should we pause here and go to a break?
Yeah, I think this is good. Yeah, for a pause. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, listeners, you can connect with Sarry and find out more about him directly on his website, finassetprotection.com. Let me spell that. FINASSETPROTECTION.com. Did I spell that right, Sarry?
Yes, yeah, finassetprotection.com.
I am notorious for removing letters and adding letters that are not there.
Me
So,
too.
oh, good. It's a sign of an intelligent brain. Too much going on. Hey, and listeners, if you go to his website, Sarry's going to offer you a free book. And we're going to talk about that free book, what that's about when we come back.
Mhm.
Now, if you're ready to take your superhero partner powers into the next decade, join me for my online leadership presence course. You'll find details on my website, carrollcoaching.com, and that has 2 R's and 2 L's. When we come back from break, we're going to be hearing more from Sarry and taking a deeper dive into breaking the cycle, and even more than that. Stay tuned. You are listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. My guest today is Sarry Ibrahim. And we've been discussing what gets in the way of taking control of our financial freedom. And we just had a really rich discussion before the break about failure. And boy, if you have a negative attitude about failure, listeners, you're going to want to make sure you listen to that part again, because Sarry really flips the script on it. And I'm already feeling even lighter and almost literally excited to go out and see what I can do to fail, because it also means increased chances of success. There we go. Okay, so Sarry, I guess where I want to ask you next is about this concept of bank on yourself. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Amy, what bank on yourself is, it's a concept. It's a way of living financially. And I found out about this concept, as I mentioned earlier, is that I was reading the book, The Bank on Yourself Revolution by Pamela Yellen. And the book talks about this strategy called the Bank on Yourself strategy. And what the author does, what Pamela Yellen does, is she addresses a lot of financial problems that people are having, especially in the United States, when it comes to, for example, their 401ks, their IRAs. These are retirement plans that people have been saving into with the assumption that they're going to have wealth in the future that has grown over time, but with market conditions, like we saw in the Great Depression, and we saw in the year 2000 and the year 2008 and the beginning of COVID in 2020, that changed a lot of retirement accounts. It changed a lot of the values. People, in other words, people lost a lot of money. So the bank on yourself concept was created to address that concern of what happens if I'm doing all the right things. I'm working, I'm saving my money, I'm investing, and I put it into an account, and then that account loses value because of market conditions. So the bank on yourself concept was designed to overcome that. So that's one thing that bank on yourself is. It's a way of growing wealth regardless of market conditions. Another problem that Pamela Yellen describes in the book is the amount of interest we pay to lenders over our lifetime. In the United States, on average, 1/3 of your income for the average American goes to servicing debt. What this means is, on average, you make $100,000 a year, $33,000 is going to go to servicing debt. That could be credit cards, car loans, student loans, your mortgage, personal debt, all types of debts that people have. And a lot of people are focused on the rate of their interest. So they might try to be in a low interest environment, which we are right now. But the problem isn't the interest rate. It's how many times you're paying a lender back to borrow something. So Pamela Yellen in the book describes that as well, is that that's a major problem. And then Bank on Yourself also addresses that, where you're becoming your own source of financing and you're able to recoup that interest you would otherwise pay to lenders. So that's the second problem it addresses. And the third major problem, taxes. So in the United States right now, we're in a relatively historically low tax rate. The highest tax rate, income taxes, is 37%, which historically is pretty low. And there's a lot of factors that suggest or project that tax rate will increase over time based off of how things are right now in terms of Medicare, Medicaid, the healthcare system, in other words, the debt on interest on national debt, and the overall Social Security budget. So these factors imply or project that tax rates will go up in the future, and that could be a whole nother set of problems for people. So Bank on Yourself can also address that. Now, what Bank on Yourself is on like a basic technical level It's pretty much the utilization of cash value whole life insurance used for living purposes, obviously, while you're still alive, even though it's life insurance, and growing the cash value in the policy to address market conditions. In other words, to grow wealth regardless of market conditions and to become your own source of financing, to pay interest back to yourself rather than to other people, and then to mitigate taxes in the future. So that way you could be almost in a 0% tax rate in the future.
Wow. Holy smokes. I'm not sure what question to ask next after that. Where would you take it after that?
Yeah, I would take it to, so why life insurance? You know, people are like, we were talking about finance this whole time. We were talking about financial literacy. We were talking about becoming financially free. What does this have to do with life insurance? And that concern is valid. It's a valid concern. What does it have to do with life insurance? What people don't know about life insurance, and I don't blame them, it's not really a hot topic to talk about, but there's specially designed policies that have cash value inside of them. So that means it's like a savings account inside of the policy, and that account grows over time. It earns interest from the insurance company, kind of like a savings account, but about 40 times what a savings account would pay. So you have this pool of cash that's growing over time, and you're able to access it. So I just wanted to make the distinction of, you know, financial literacy, financial freedom, to life insurance. And then also that this isn't simply just about go out and buy life insurance. It's more of understand the concept and the reason for the concept, and then use this, you know, what we're going to talk about, bank on yourself or dividend paying whole life insurance, as a tool to address those problems.
And this book that you give when people go to your website, is this the book that talks about the bank on yourself?
Yeah, this is the Bank on Yourself Revolution by Pamela Yellen. And I give this book away for free. Yep.
Awesome. I want to back up a little bit and go sort of a more mild question here, though. Decision making, and in perhaps relationship to what you've been talking about. Why is decision making important? How do you suggest people improve in their decision making process?
Definitely. So the reason why I bring up decision making, Amy, is because it correlates directly with your income and with the amount of wealth you have. In other words, people who tend to change their mind frequently, and people who tend to take longer periods of time to make decisions, also tend to struggle financially. So there's a direct relationship between decision making and having financial freedom and having a financially free, comfortable life. And the reason why is because everything we do is time is money, in other words. So when we waste time, we're also wasting money. But really, there are principles behind decision making. So it's not just about how fast you can make a decision. It's also about certain core principles you have and ways. This is something I learned, actually. This was the positive side of project management. Exactly. Yep. Project management involves a lot of you're looking at one thing 10 times. You're saying, all right, you know, how big is it? What's the cost of it? How long will it take? When will we start it? So you're looking at it from different angles so that way, when it comes time to make decisions, you have more information about a certain thing. And you also have core ideas or principles that are pretty similar from one case to another case that you could apply. So for example, if your decision is what should I invest in? Well, when you have these core beliefs beforehand, like for example, I only invest in real estate and I only do it passively, and I'm only going to do it in the Chicagoland area, and I'm only going to do it through where I loan my money out to people, and I only do it within this certain range. Everything else that is not in those buckets or in those criteria is an automatic no. So it's like you're thinking like an algorithm, where it's like, if it doesn't fit these 5 things, then the answer is no. And I've noticed from successful people that successful people are really good at these things, where it's like they have a set criteria, they have standards, and then if it doesn't meet those, they automatically exit it. And most of the time, that's what they're doing. Most of the time, they're saying no to things and only saying yes to certain things. So that helps them stay on track. It helps them not take unnecessary risks or jump to things that they can't control.
So as I was listening to you, what came up for me is I had this metaphor. I call it the Catholic uniform approach to life. And so let me explain for a minute. For years, I've stopped eating certain, foods, dairy and gluten. And so often people are like, oh, just try this, just try that. And I decided that it was all or nothing. I wasn't going to let my mood decide what I wanted each day or at each meal to eat, because then it would have been a disaster. And so the analogy of the Catholic uniform, I've always was very sad as a little kid growing up that people would have to wear a uniform to school, because that was one of my favorite things every morning was getting dressed and deciding what I was going to wear. And it was very joyful. And as I became older, I was like, that Catholic uniform thing is not such a bad idea, because you wake up, and even if you're not really awake, what you have to do to get dressed and what it's going to look like. It's automated. There's no decision-making process.
Yep.
So very long explanation to apply the Catholic uniform approach to this concept of investing.
You're so right. I love that. You're taking away the unpredictability. You're also taking away the time. You don't have to think about what you're going to wear. You also don't have to go shopping in the middle of the week to think about what you're going to wear for school. It's already set. So that way you chop that out, you automate that segment of your life. And then now you can shift that focus to other areas, other areas that need more priority.
Yeah, it's a time and energy saving approach. Yeah, which helps to give your brain free space for other things.
Yeah, and time and energy is more important than money in life. It's the most important thing is your time and your energy.
Yeah, very true. Oh, wow. I'm really glad we took a deep dive into the idea of decision making. That was rich for me. So my next question for you is, you talked about this early on, about the importance of believing in yourself. So how do you stay motivated and to consistently believe in yourself?
I could tell you, Amy, that I don't always spring out of bed. I don't always jump out of bed and ready to work. Sometimes it can be a struggle, especially when you are self-employed, just because you don't have that, co-working environment. I do have employees that work for me, but the way I stay motivated is I use a checklist every day. So I open up my calendar. I do this every day around 7 o'clock in the morning. I open up my calendar and then I write out all the tasks that I have in order based off of the times they're due. And then this does a couple of things. Number one, it gets my brain working. It gets my handwriting. It gets everything moving. I could just not write it down and just look at my calendar and implement from there. But I like the idea of writing it all out vertically in order. And then I actually add a couple other tasks that are easier tasks to do before everything else, like 2 or 3 in the beginning. The easiest tasks in the front or the top of the checklist. This way, as I'm doing those things, I go and I check them off. It's creating momentum now.
Yes.
Now it's making the next tasks easier and easier to do. And then let's just say, for example, the day's almost done. I have 20 tasks written out and there's like 19. I'm going to finish at 20th one. I'm pretty much done for the whole day. It looks awkward where everything's checked off except for one box. So now I'm like tricking myself. I'm leaving things. I'm tricking myself to do things almost on autopilot. There are times where I look at my checklist and like there's like 20 things done. I did 100% of the things I wanted to do. Again, even if I don't do 100%, back to our previous conversation, that's okay too. As long the checks themselves are more important than the comparison to the other one. So in other words, as long as I'm checking those off, that's fine. But I look at it and I was like, wow, I thought I was really tired today. I thought I was really out of it today, So I'm doing back to the uniform. I'm doing these things almost in autopilot where I'm just checking it and I'm taking away the stressful part about it and the contemplation part about it. And I'm doing more action and execution than just thinking about the tasks.
I like your approach better than mine. Sometimes what I do is I ask myself, okay, if I don't get these things done, how will I feel at the end of the day? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to feel kind of crappy and disappointed with myself. And I won't be as excited when I sit down to watch that movie on Netflix. So it's sort of where will my mindset be? How will I feel about the day when I reflect on it? And that sometimes, not always, gets me to do those things that are still on that list. Yeah. So let me ask you about you. One of the things I read about in your bio is that you help real estate investors. How do you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the problems we talked about the reasons why the bank on yourself concept was invented. We talked about market conditions and interest and taxes. And those three tend to be very relevant to real estate investors because they're dealing with a lot of cash flow. They're dealing with a lot of properties. So they tend to have to worry about market conditions. They tend to have to worry about interest, how much interest they pay to acquire properties and manage properties, and then how much tax exposure they have, because they tend to make a lot of money. So I wanted to make that one of the niches that we have. We work with real estate investors who are either active real estate investors or passive real estate investors. And the difference is active real estate investors go out, they find the properties, they talk to the realtors or the brokers, they make offers, they hire contractors, they hire property management companies. They're actively involved in the business. Whereas passive real estate investing is, you're, for example, a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, you have your full-time job, you want to get into real estate, but you're too busy to get into real estate. So you just outsource that entire function. You find another active real estate investor or a general partner, and then you invest in their fund or in their projects. So for example, this is how a lot of properties are bought, where it's like a 400 unit apartment building that's like $10 million. Typically it's going to be through like numerous partners where they're investing into the project. And that's something I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of both active real estate investing and passive real estate investing. And then we've niched down to Bank on Yourself to help both active and passive real estate investors. But that's kind of the differences. And we're helping them like grow wealth outside of the stock market. And then I think number two is more important, is that they're becoming their own source of financing. So the active real estate investors would have to go out to banks or private money lenders, borrow from them, pay interest to them, follow their terms and conditions. And in poor economic times, they have to usually it's the borrowers who have to suffer, not necessarily the lenders. So we're helping them become essentially their own mortgage, their own, not literally starting a financial institution, but more of them becoming their own source of financing to kind of take control of that part of their business, of their life. And then also the third part, which is the taxes. We're helping them mitigate taxes for the future. So this way they could almost have a tax-free retirement.
Wow. I want to ask you this next question because I want to give you some time to talk about it. And if it's before we have to wrap up, if you have a example of a client that you can talk about who's been someone who you've worked with, I'd love to hear that as an example. So what I want to ask you now is how to describe how a Bank on Yourself type whole life policy could be structured.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll talk about the client example first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I have one client who owns a manufacturing company, and there's something called like buying on credit. This is where like you would buy inventory but not pay cash upfront for it. You would buy on credit. Usually it's 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, depending on the negotiation and other factors. And in this situation, this client has a 90-day period between buying something and then having to pay for it. So what that means is, he makes like $5 or $6 million a year. So what this means is at any given time, he has hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in his bank in the meantime until he has to pay his creditors or until he has to pay the vendors. So while going through this financial analysis, I was also asking him, what's important to you? And he was like, I just want to maximize profits. I want to maximize efficiency and mitigate risks and mitigate like leakage. So we figured out that we could allocate those funds to the Bank on Yourself concept. In the meantime, from the time he earns that money to the time he has to pay it, and instead of that money just sitting in a bank account, not doing anything from just 0% interest, just sitting there, we could have those funds sitting in a whole life insurance policy, earning him between 4 and 6% every year on that cash value. Again, this isn't astronomical rates of return. It's not a huge rate of return. It's very conservative, but it beats 0%.
Yeah.
And then he would have the ability to also do this and also increase the value of his business, because these whole life insurance policies that we structured for him are owned by the business. So this is what we did. So the two things really is earn compound interest on that money while he's holding on to it. And the second thing is it increased the value of his business. Now, as far as structuring and designing the policies, that could be a whole nother podcast. But to kind of make it in a basic way is that it comes down to the financial analysis. Where is the client's situation? What are their goals? And then we design it from there. So for example, if somebody makes $40,000 a year, and they're single versus somebody who's married and makes $500,000 a year. They're going to have completely different designs, different funding amounts, different periods. But one kind of rule we start off with maybe we fund a policy with like 5% of their annual gross income into a policy to start with. And then we might fund it until retirement age. That's just one example. It could be, that's not a hard rule. That's just kind of an idea from where we start from.
Wow. As I was listening to you, and comparing what I do with people, it's like you're giving them this freedom and independence and like when I work with people, it's like, okay, I'm going to, with the concept of rather than give them a fish to eat for a day, you're giving them the concept of fishing. And it's so rewarding.
Yes.
To see that people are then able to do these things on their own.
Absolutely.
Very cool. My last question for you, and you may have something else you want to share, is invest in yourself, or rather invest in your business or save cash. Which do you prefer and why?
Yeah, I love that question. So I would, first kind of consider the pros and cons of both. So let's start with, for example, investing your money or actually reinvesting your money, which is a little bit different. So you own a business, for example, you're generating revenue and you have profits, and you decide to reinvest back into your business. The benefits of doing so is that you get to compound your money. You go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, whatever units or elements of the business you have. So you're compounding it and growing it. This is how a lot of people grow their businesses, by reinvesting back into the business. And then I guess the downside to reinvesting back into your business consistently or investing anywhere else is that you tend to tie up liquidity, or you tie up cash flow because it's invested somewhere else.
Right.
And typically to take that money back out, it could be depending on what you're investing in and depending on the industry you're in, it could be a little bit tricky to get that money back out. So that's kind of the pros and cons of that. And then on the cash side, if I just take from my profits and then save cash, the benefits to that is I have liquidity, instant liquidity if I need it for the future for my business or my personal life. And the downside to that is you lose the opportunity cost you could have earned had you invested that money somewhere else. So now how do we take like the pros and connect them, and then the cons, and like, kind of this like X where we're connecting the right dots.
Right.
And that could be done through financial vehicles out there. There's many financial vehicles. If you work with a financial advisor or financial coach, they can show you these different vehicles that you could use, like collateralizing assets, where you're buying an asset, borrowing against it, using that for another asset, and all these different intricate things you could do. So much that you could do. And one of those things happens to be bank on yourself. You could use a bank on yourself policy in your business to save your money and reinvest it back into your business. So this way you're doing two things now. You're saving cash for the future and you are reinvesting it. And I really want to drill down, Amy, on the differences between using bank on yourself, whole life policies, and then just having your money in a bank account. Now,
Okay.
it's obvious that number one is that your whole life policy is going to yield a higher rate of return than just a simple bank account. But the other issue too is that if you just have, for example, $100,000 in a bank account, and let's just say you're not getting any interest on it, the obvious problem is that you're going to lose to inflation. So that means that the cost of goods and services are going to increase over time, and your buying power, the money you have, is going to lose value. So things get more expensive. The money you have, the $100,000, isn't in reality going to always be $100,000. It's going to lose value because you could buy less things with that money. The second thing is that you're going to lose opportunity costs you could have earned had you kept reinvesting that money over and over again. You could have, doubled or tripled that money every 7 or 10 years if you invested that money. And the third part is really important. This is the human nature. So if I have just $100,000 sitting in a checking account, I'm more likely to spend that money because I have direct access to it always. I could use a debit card. I could transfer money. I could online banking. You write a check. It's very liquid and very accessible, but it's almost too accessible to the point where human nature comes in and is actually problematic. So I want to address that third one. Actually, I want to kind of create some barriers between me and my money and make it just a little bit more difficult to reach than it already is. And when you do it when you have those barriers between you and your money, you're more likely to save it. And you're also more likely to think, 10 times before you touch your money.
Yes.
If you have those barriers between you and your money.
If the cookies are down in the basement in the freezer, triple wrapped, going to be a lot less interesting than if they're in the cabinet.
Exactly.
Oh, Sarry, this has been lovely. We're just about out of time. And so in 30 seconds or less, what is a call for action you have for the listeners?
Yeah, so they could, thank you for that. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Listeners can go to finassetprotection.com, and then they could schedule a free 15-minute call with me, either over Zoom or over the phone. And I'll send them a free copy of the book, The Bank on Yourself Revolution by Pam Leon. So free book by going to finassetprotection.com and scheduling a free 15-minute call.
Super cool. So listeners, my call for action to you is to send me your communication conundrums, clashes, challenges, mishaps, blunders, and successes via email or as social media. And let's put a twist on it. You can make them financially connected, because I'm sure that finances bring up a lot of conflict and stress for people. I'll read them, I'll discuss them on future shows and make suggestions. And you can email me at amy@carrollcoaching.com, 2 R's, 2 L's. You can for sure reach out to Sarry on finassetprotection.com, get that free book, get that free 15-minute chat with him. If nothing else, it's going to be a lovely conversation, and I suspect it'll be a lot more than that. Now, be sure to switch on, tune in, listen up, and be inspired next week when I'll be talking with Lily Newman, a leadership expert who is passionate about empowering women and sharing her insights for growing more leaders globally. Why leaders must leave a legacy, how to deal with self-sabotage, the imposter syndrome, and many hot tips for being a leader who will make a difference. You can check out more information on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or connect with me on any of my social media channels, Amy Carroll Coaching. Now, if you're game for more, I'm going to be hopping over to Facebook Live 5 minutes past the hour for a short chat on today's show. Sarry, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Amy.
And thank you, listeners. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Happy partnering, everyone.